Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. The name of this session is it's about entrepreneurship, the roadmap to success. So I guess we'll start off with a brief introduction of ourselves. As I said, my name is Ambreen Mirza. I am the president of Open Global, which is an organization that was founded about 25 years ago to promote entrepreneurship within the Pakistani diaspora. It stands for the Organization of Pakistani Entrepreneurs of North America. But now today, we are actually global with 15 chapters around the world, from the North America to Europe, all the way to Asia and the Middle East. Outside of Open, I myself am also an entrepreneur. I started a consulting company called Polity. Before that, I was in finance. I started my career at Morgan Stanley after graduating from Tufts University. I also grew up in a family-owned business, so learned a lot about entrepreneurship secondhand too.
Sure. So, and that's just like the tip of the iceberg. Like you, Ambreen has done so many interesting things, and she brings so much knowledge, experience, and just like a very good nature and to this panel. So I encourage all of you to ask questions of us. Feel free to interrupt. We want this to be interactive. My name's Syed Muhammad Ali. I'm originally from Pakistan. I was born and raised in different parts of Pakistan. I came to the US as a student. I eventually ended up, I started off as an economics and political science major at the University of Rochester. And then I came to DC to go to law school at GW Law School. I finished my JD, and I've been practicing law since 2000. So I've got a couple of years of law practice under my belt. I now, I had my own law practice for 10 years in the last, 23 years. Currently, I'm a shareholder at a law firm called Offit Kerman. It's an East Coast law firm. We have about 350 lawyers in 20 different cities on the East Coast and also a Los Angeles, California office. My own expertise is corporate immigration. So I help entrepreneurs. I help businesses with setting up and growing and hiring employees and entering into contracts and resolving disputes and all of that. So there's a lot to discuss there, like from a technical legal side. Like if anybody has questions, I'm happy to get into that part. And we're both here to share from our personal experiences. We're excited that you're here. We'd love to know you more and kind of learn what brought you to this room.
Absolutely. So, I personally, started off kind of during that dot-com boom days, right? So I had a lot of exposure with the technology entrepreneurs after working in a family-owned business, which was focused on real estate. And then afterwards, I went to graduate school. I worked at the intersection of policy, international development, and entrepreneurship. So I worked with entrepreneurs to kind of advance, it's kind of an interesting story about the kind of entrepreneurs I worked with.
So Ambreen, let's look at, take us in your own journey.
Yeah.
Kind of like where you started, maybe with your education, and kind of what your thoughts were about what direction your professional life would take. So take us from the beginning and then just bring us perhaps to today and
Sure.
with some highlights.
Sure thing. So I studied international relations and history at Tufts University. I had a focus on the Middle East and South Asia. And I had a dream that I was going to make the world a better place. My own father was actually an engineer. He had 3 engineering degrees. He grew up in that generation where he was told that you either become an engineer or a doctor. And so he became an engineer. But his dream was to actually have his own business. And so he started more than one business. And I grew up since my childhood watching him. He first used to export Oriental rugs while still being an engineer from Pakistan. And then afterwards, he invested in real estate and eventually left his engineering career and went into real estate full time. And so my first jobs throughout my teenage years was working in my father's real estate business. And I always used to say to myself, I would never want to be an entrepreneur because I would see how hard my father would work. And my father used to encourage me he said, do whatever you want to do, and follow your dreams. And that's how I followed my dreams to Tufts. And I was like one of the few people who was majoring in international relations and history in the community at that time. But unfortunately, as fate would have it, my father ended up very tragically. He passed away while I was an undergrad, and was only 50 years old, had lung cancer, and that forced me to leave my education and start managing his business. And overnight, I had to become very business savvy, and overnight, I had to develop those business skills, and I kind of had to abandon the whole change the world dream. And so for the next few years, I kind of finished my education, managed his business. And then by the time I finished my education, my goals changed. I actually wanted to change my own financial situation, think about my family's financial situation, think about other people's financial future. So I ended up at Morgan Stanley in asset management and wealth management. And there, it was during the dot-com boom days when investing in the stock market was the most popular thing to do, and all the technology companies were going up. So I suddenly found myself networking with all kinds of professional organizations, building up my client book, developing clients. And then I had a lesson that, as the stock market started changing, that, I am really good with networking, business development, but I don't necessarily love stocks, especially when they go down. I like them only when they go up. And so one of my clients, who was a technology entrepreneur, he suggested, why don't you join my company and help me raise money, because I'm looking for funds. And maybe you can help me with like my business plan because you're good with communications and writing. And at that time, a friend of mine who was an attorney said, Ambreen, why don't you instead start your own consulting company? And this way you can kind of define your role with this startup. And this was going to be my temporary job. And next thing you know, this became a decade-long job for me where I would write business plans, strategic plans for entrepreneurs, help them with pitches, help them with all kinds of like writing and communications. And then I moved from not just working with entrepreneurs, but even with investors, with publications, wanting to cover entrepreneurs. And suddenly I found out that I really love talking about entrepreneurship, writing about entrepreneurship, networking with entrepreneurs. I even started teaching entrepreneurship at the university, working with government agencies, promoting entrepreneurship. So I started working with the US government even on that side. And then I realized I even found my way back to my original passion of international affairs this way, because I started taking this internationally then and found that, in fact, I could use entrepreneurship as a tool to promote economic development, and found my way on so many USAID funded projects that were promoting entrepreneurship. So
yeah, that's really fascinating, and part of my job, like what I do now is, as a lawyer, like we are, there's all kinds of different lawyers and all kinds of different expertise areas. Like just like there are doctors, there's an oncologist or a cardiologist, and so within the legal profession, there's a lot of different types of lawyers, and I'm an immigration lawyer. But one of the commonalities is that we all become really good investigators. Like we learn how to communicate, how to ask questions, how to ask important questions, build up data. And so I have some questions for you, and we'll try to go through them today. So time-wise, I think we go to 6. So, we can keep talking, and again, we can leave some time for question and answer at the end, but please do interrupt us, right? So let's, but before I go there, maybe I'll share a little bit about myself, right? And then, I recognize there's a lot of younger folks here, and I really like that. Thank you all for coming. You may be in school and thinking about what you want to do with your education, and hopefully we'll leave you with a few ideas. And I think one of the themes that we were discussing earlier was that we are now, I guess I consider myself like a first generation immigrant, right? I was born in Pakistan. I came here at 18 years old, and I've now spent the majority of my life in the US. But a lot of my mindset is shaped by the old world, right? My psyche is shaped by my dad and my granddad. And, one of the things that we wanted to convey to you was that we have to be aware that we may be, at least depending, maybe the younger ones are different, but we have to acknowledge the mindset and address that whether the mindset that we inherited continues to be relevant or not. So what we suggested was that the old school mold of, like, let's say, the Asian mindset of how our societies were hierarchical, or our societies were segregated by class or gender or status, so a lot of that in the US is not relevant. So we discuss things like sometimes there's societal or parental expectations, like be a doctor, be an engineer, be a lawyer. A lot of that stuff you have to be, if entrepreneurial spirit is all about taking risks, right? You're taking calculated risks, right? So be unafraid to venture out. Now, having said that, I'm not saying that just do things without putting thought into it, doing things without planning. You need all of that, right?
Yeah.
But do you want to add on to that?
Absolutely. I think one thing that I really love about the society is the courage to fail, right? And they call this failing forward, right? And with there's no such thing as a bad experience. That even sometimes what we think might be the very worst experience in the world, there may be a silver lining, something that you learn from it. And like, I really thought to myself that, I had this dream back in, as early as actually like 10 years old. One day I would work in the United Nations, or I literally had these really passions about more like poverty alleviation. That was my path. And I think when I was at Morgan Stanley, I always say that I had my quarter life crisis, like when NASDAQ hit 5,000, because I said, how did I become that woman that's, the one who makes wealthy people wealthier? When I studied international affairs, I've moved so far away from that 10-year-old. But then I feel like actually you sometimes find yourself on a path to bring you exactly where you need to be. So 10 years later, I found my way to graduate school at Johns Hopkins SAIS, where I studied public policy, and I got to focus on international development. And I found that I could actually make an impact on UN projects and World Bank projects and USAID projects, because I did bring a finance background that I would never have sought out. But I was actually forced to kind of develop those financial skills. And that became very valuable to me in the goals that were very important to me. So sometimes the things that we think might be most, distracting, makes us resilient. And I think that is the ability to pivot is quite important, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. When I was thinking about preparing for today, one of the things that we were looking at were how our early experiences shape us, right? Like experiences that we have in our younger years, and how we build up our tool set. Like, what are the skills needed for success. And a lot of times you're accumulating those skills like without really knowing them. So like just going out there, getting experience, like just being out there, meeting people, volunteering, just staying busy, trying to surround yourself with smart people, and picking up, like especially for the younger folks, right? So I mean, we learn things like, for example, I didn't really know what a lawyer was until my family had to hire a lawyer. Like, so it was for my mom. She used to have a green card in the 80s, and she was gonna migrate to we were all gonna migrate to the US, but something happened where she stayed too long in Pakistan, and when she was trying to come back, her green card was taken away from her. And then my family had to hire a lawyer who had to kind of challenge all of this. And I said, oh, okay. I was like maybe 10 years old at that time. I said, lawyer ne khat likha hai. And we waited and waited. And I didn't have a very good opinion of this lawyer because he couldn't get my mom her green card back. But that was the first time I learned what is a lawyer in sort of an American context. But the point was that what I was going to connect it to is experiences when we were younger. So one of the things that I did as a young, like between two high school years, like I like between the last 2 years, I did an internship at IBM in Pakistan, in Karachi. And I had an interest in computers. I like programming. I like playing with computers. And this was back in the day, like hard disks weren't a thing. Like you had floppy disks that you would put in and out. And it's like, well, I had a 10 megabyte hard drive, which is a big deal. And I was assigned to the customer relations team. And my summer was, my project was, the manager came in and he gave me a list of their 300 clients around the country that they wanted to invite to their annual retreat. And so I got a database with names, addresses, and I had to invite these people for a conference. And so as a 17, 18-year-old, I was part of a team tasked with sending out letters to people I had no idea who they were, and inviting them to this conference. And so, but, it was a simple task, but I had like a lot of curiosity around it that like, oh, wow, let's see, maybe I want to get a lot of people to attend. So I kind of had this like, sentiment of like, you know what, I'm going to make these letters count. I'm going to get a lot of people to attend this conference. And then when people would actually write back saying, hey, yeah, we want to join, it would be like, yes, feels good. And when I think back, that experience gave me this, idea that that's how you build your network. Like you reach out to people, you get to know what they do, you introduce yourself. And I think I still rely on that basic experience in my legal career now, like, because I have to go around to conferences, meeting clients, I have to travel, I have to know other lawyers that will be trusting me to share their problems. But, we all build on skills that we learned as kids, and then we just keep building, right? And sometimes you may be heading in a different direction, and you'll take 5, 6, 7, 8 turns before you perhaps end up where you want to stay. And that's kind of get more into that with my own story in a little bit.
Oh, but I think absolutely I feel like there's no such thing as bad learning. All learning is very useful. So I'm even thinking about like my earliest job, like as a 14-year-old, like I'd come from high school, go to my dad's office, and I'd just be on the phones because no one could tell what my age is. And I'd just be renting out apartments on the phone, or answering the phone to say, okay, these apartments are available. And I felt like I developed very good phone skills. And years later, when I was at Morgan Stanley, I was very, very articulate, whether it's like the stocks are going up or down. And my boss used to say, listen, when as new people would get hired, they would say, just shadow Umbreen. So when you're feeling kind of down, or you're kind of suddenly feeling like you're in a slump, just shadow Umbreen, because she has such a good phone personality. And there's a saying that, when you are actually smiling, like people can hear you smiling on the phone. These were the days before Zoom calls. So I used to be very conscious of, being on the phone and being very, very upbeat. And I felt like, because people can actually sense your moods, sense your energy, sense your vibes. And that actually translates into opportunities or lack thereof, because people actually make decisions about who they're going to work with based on if they like you and if they trust you and your energy levels, So I feel like that comes at a personality trait you develop early.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, our environments, and I think let me just step back also to the context of today. We are here as part of a Ummah conference.
Yeah.
I will back up a little bit, and I will kind of say thank you to Ummah for inviting us, and thank you all for being here in this room. And if I could go back, I would say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and I would also say Ya Ali Madad, because all of what we do, the intent and the reward, the success, it comes from above, right? So we start out with good intentions, and we are a work in progress throughout our lives, right? So part of our task here is to help. You've got an amazing entrepreneur in you. You've got it. You may realize something in the time to come. You're on this path, and we're just hoping that we can be a little bit of a catalyst here and there. But I think our faith and the fact that we're all connected in this, to the Ahl Bayt and this was mentioned earlier in today's panel that. Like we had a breakfast discussion with Dilawar Syed, who's the head of the SBA, like one of the highest ranking Muslim executives in our administration, and we were talking about how our Prophet Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his family, Hazrat Khadija, Bibi Fatima, Hazrat Ali, Imam Hussain Hassan, these people. They were examples of people who did not shy away from a challenge, right? They took difficult things and they acted on them, right? And interestingly, right, Hazrat Rasul chose a businesswoman to marry, right? It's important. Like all these people were very much active in worldly life, right? So we have great examples to follow. So I just wanted to emphasize those core values, right? We know them very well through our teachings around our faith. So I'll tell a little bit about myself. So I started, right, as a obedient son of a very successful dad. My dad was a rags richest story. Like he came from very poor background in northern India, was born in UP and migrated to Pakistan at partition. They arrived in Karachi with nothing. And dad worked hard. He sort of, from very humble roots, he became successful, and he gave me a life that he couldn't afford. He sent me to a good university in the US and gave us great education. So I kind of started my career with a sense of duty to him that I had to make him happy. Like his happiness was more important than my preference. So we didn't necessarily agree on my initially I wanted to be a computer scientist, so I wanted to do IT and programming, but he didn't really like that. He said, no, I don't want you to be a technical guy. And I was like, okay, I want you to study economics at undergrad, because that will teach you the way of the world. I said, acha, but I did economics. I didn't like it. I also added on a political science major, which I loved. That led me into law. I loved studying law. And for me, law was all about like human rights and justice and freedom. Like I saw how desperate at least some of these developing countries that suffer from so much injustice and repression, they need people to like raise the voices for justice and human rights. And that's what I was really passionate about. I hadn't really thought about a professional career, making money and paying the rent. So from undergrad, I went to law school with some general ideas about, I wanted to just, go to school to learn how to be a fighter for justice. Didn't know how I would make money. But and then yeah, my dad would be happy if I got good grades. I passed the bar exam. I became a lawyer, and I went into a litigation law firm because I thought litigation is what like real lawyers do. You got to go to court and win arguments and impress the judges. So I went into litigation, and my first job was at a firm in DC. And we represented individuals that were injured by pharmaceutical products. Like if you had a medical device defect, or if you took a medicine that produced an adverse effect, a heart attack, a stroke, like paralysis, or So we had cases all over the U.S. and it was a great experience. Like I got to travel a lot. I had to go to court quite a bit. It was a lot of science and pharmaceutical technical information and detail, and it was great. But I think I was still doing that because I was still trying to make my dad happy, because that was his idea of success. But I hadn't yet heard my own voice of where am I headed. And so after about 10 years of litigation, and this is where one of our questions is that how do setbacks teach you? Like how do you learn? So I experienced my first setback when after 11 years of being in the law practice, in 2012, I was at a litigation firm. This was the second firm out of law school I was with. I was a mid-level associate. I was doing okay. My bosses liked me. My work product was good. But I don't know, there was something missing. I didn't find that I was really able to put my heart into it. I just didn't think that what I was doing was very special. Like my clients would be happy, but I'd be like, okay, big deal, whatever. But then 3 or 4 of the firm's biggest clients went into bankruptcy, and basically the firm laid off. I was laid off along with 4 other attorneys, and suddenly I was like, it came as a surprise. I didn't have an income. I was, by that time, my mom and dad had migrated to America. I was supporting them. I was single, and suddenly I'm like, I don't have a job, and it came as a big surprise to me. And then I started like spending off of my savings, and I was scared. And that's when so I took a hard knock and I assessed what I needed to do. And some of my friends and mentors said, hey, Muhammad Ali, you're good at networking. You have a lot of friends. Why don't you start your own law firm, right? And the problem was that at that time, I did not have a passion in the law. Like I didn't know what type of law I wanted to do, which was not good for someone who's been doing it for 10 years. But then I said, okay, I'll do whatever I need to do to make money, and I'll have faith and I'll move ahead. And so then you learn a lot about, okay, how do you talk to clients? How do you get business? How do you learn areas of law that you don't know about, right? So how do you build that coalition of sort of, resources to help you learn the expertise areas, sell your marketing stuff, manage the organization. And, thank God, over a span of 10 years, I was successful. Like I grew it. But the best thing about that experience was that when I was forced literally on my knees, I had to quickly discover, like, what is it that I love doing? What do I want to do for the rest of my days? And just luckily, immigration became that passion. Like when I switched away from litigating cases, and I said, hey, oh, wow, it's really fun to get somebody a green card. It's really fun to get them a nationality. I love this stuff. This is great. I can do it for families. I can do it for big businesses. I can do it for large multinational companies. And I'm actually pretty good at this. So that story started from that initial bad experience. Yeah. And I'll pause now and let's hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I think that's a wonderful story. And I think that also leads me to the other question people have. Sometimes they'll say, is now the right time to start a business? Like you could, some people will say, no, don't start a business, get more experience before you start a business. Or some people will say, no, you know what, you're too old now and the time has passed and you can't take that risk. And, what I love is actually there's so many resources available for every age. So I've taught at a university, and there's so many business plan competitions and incentives for people while they're undergraduates or graduate students to start their businesses, and people are offering them funds to start businesses when they've had no work experience and they're just students and they just have a really compelling idea and a great business plan. So you see young 20-something-year-olds start businesses. And then at the same time, you see people on their second career, like they're retirees, and they might want to pursue a passion, or they have a great business idea, or might have all enjoyed Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? Sorry, I forgot about my microphone. But the famous Kentucky Fried Chicken entrepreneur, that was his last ditch business attempt as a senior citizen. I can't remember if he was like 70 years old or 65 plus, when he decided to just try to commercialize his grandmother's home recipe, which is now turned into a worldwide franchise. Now it's called KFC. But I love the KFC story. Like it's never too late to become a success story like that. And then you have other people who might have a very stable job. Like I've seen people who will start jobs on the side. Like my own father would invest in real estate while he was a full-time engineer, and then he felt comfortable to leave his job. Or, professors or teachers, or so many people will have start off with a small income just so that they can maybe build a nest egg. And so to be an entrepreneur doesn't mean you have to necessarily go all in. It doesn't have to be all the way, you can take baby steps into it too. Should we also open it up to some questions from people?
Yeah, please. We'll have a mic going around the room.
Yeah.
So absolutely. And I'll just, while we wait for that question, I mean, there are definitely moments where you do need to stop and do some self-assessment and engage allies, right? You find some trusted mentors to sort of give you feedback. But please go ahead, Shia. Are you ready?
And introduce yourself, please, if you don't mind. Like say your name and.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa Islam.
I'm Farheen Shirazi. I'm a cardiologist. So I actually, in 2012, went through a crisis of faith just like you in relation to my career. And I finally finished all my 15 years of training. And I thought, this is not what I signed up for. This is not why I went into medicine. I thought I was healing people, but I'm just a drug dealer for Uncle Sam. And that's really what I started to feel like. So I was in debt, and I felt like, I have to, I spent my whole youth training, so I got to work now and pay off my debt, and maybe I'll figure it out. And there was a lot of inertia, actually, for the last 10 years of how would I do this? So I just kept working for corporate America, not with my heart in it, and trying to figure out how to practice the way I want to practice. So I finally figured it out, and I did wellness medicine certifications, and holistic medicine is sort of where I'm at. And I know how to do it. And I've been kind of implementing it in my traditional practice. But the fear of no business acumen at all, right? All I know how to do is be a doctor. But there's a need for it, and I meet people every day who want what I have to offer. And it's just this major fear where, and I keep listening to these motivational talks about how to be an entrepreneur, and they're like, you just got to go guns blazing all in. And the thing is, and they're like, if you don't have that fire under you and the fear that it's this or nothing, then you won't really make it happen. And so I finally have come to the sort of thing that you were talking about, of doing a part-time gig, which is what I'm doing now, hoping to float myself so I have some steady income, and I can try to do this on the side, start low and see where it goes. But it's really tough when you follow one of the dominant paths that's completely laid out for you, like a lawyer, doctor, engineer, and then you're like, well, This is not what I envisioned for my life. And I want to help people. I still have a calling to help people, but I don't feel like I'm doing it justice. So let me figure out how to do it. But like, it's, that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm just like, I need to just do it. But it's, I just feel like there isn't enough. I don't know physician. I know there was a lot of physician burnout post-COVID and everything, but most of them are leaving medicine. So I don't want to leave healthcare, but to find that niche to do what it is that I want to do, it's a little, you know, I get a lot of discouragement everywhere I look because they're like, why are you, you know, you spent all this time with your education, your training, you're good at what you do. But yeah.
So I have two pieces of advice for that.
Yeah.
So I myself, like I said, I did not have business training myself. But one thing that I did find was, and I think that this is how I got involved with OPEN, the Organization of Pakistani Entrepreneurs of North America. I surrounded myself with the people who were really good at having their own businesses. Either they were technologists or they were very business savvy. And I mean, I did this at, 20 years ago, back when I, knew I just needed the mentorship and the skills. And having lost my father at a young age, I suddenly started, talking to people who are in my father's age group and getting advice and looking for mentors. But I would say two things is to network with, it's important to know what you know and what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So you can always find someone who can be your CFO, who can be, or you're like, for me, I'm also not a technologist. So I always look for the person who is very technologically savvy. So I get a CTO, right? And to have a CTO and a CFO, I know that I'm not a CPA, so you can always, recruit those people. It's the most important thing that you have is a product and a skill that is marketable that's going to bring in those revenues. But I don't know if you want to add to that, Mohammed.
Absolutely. I mean, that I'm just very grateful that you are discussing this with us. And I lots of credit to you because you've taken this is not the first step, but you're being here at this event, surrounding yourself and maybe putting some level of trust in us to ask this question. I think that is a basic thing that we were going to recommend, that we have to be open to being a little vulnerable, right? And sharing that, hey, look, I'm doing this. Am I doing it right? What do I need to do? And that's exactly what we've gone through. And to our great, good fortune, we've met people that have helped us, shown us the way. I was in exactly this kind of situation where I was having this. So I told you that I did a little internship at IBM back in Karachi when I was a teenager. And so one of my best friends was somebody that I met during that summer. We were in the same office. When the boss wasn't looking, we'd close the door and play computer games on the PCs. And so we bonded. And so when I was doing my own transition, like you mentioned, that you kind of try to move away from what you had been in, I was talking to my friend. I said, Asad, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I've been doing this stuff for 10, 11 years. All of you guys, you're set. You're where you want to be. You're successful in your careers. And here I am trying to move into a totally new thing. And he said, Muhammad Ali, the fact is that I know you're a smart guy. I know you have the passion. Once you find that, what you love doing, you're going to quickly overtake your competition. And he was so right. Like, within a span of a short amount of time, not only did I catch up with my competition, but I've left them behind. Like, I was invited to be a shareholder of a 350 lawyer law firm after I joined the race 10 years late, right? So I was one of the, and a lot of it is thanks to Allah and my family and friends. But look, hey, there's people out there, they may or may not be within our own community. There's everywhere. Like, so what the things that I guess helped me was, recognizing that I had a strong issue, that I had feelings around, that I needed to change. And then assembling, like Amreen was saying, like your own sort of board of directors to sort of guide and mentor and help. And just, it's a journey. It can be really rewarding when you feel like what you do aligns with your values, right? That's the magic. And I tell people, now I found the magic because look at this room. There's all these young people here, all of us from different countries, different parts of the world. I have a 5-year-old daughter now whose mom is Iranian, whose dad is Pakistani. She's in the middle. And the America that I want for her is an America with all these faces, happy, smiling, diverse. And what do I do for a living? I make America diverse by bringing in immigrants. Like, I mean, do I need more motivation in my, that's a kind of passion that brings so much energy. Like it's, yeah, the money and success will come, but I think if your values align with what you do, and yeah, that's what I hear you trying to move towards, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you need that board of directors, like you were saying, to make your company successful, but also even in your social circle, I feel like, and you brought up your friend, you need some cheerleaders that get it, that get your goals, like what you want, that which direction you are moving in. And you also even need someone, I feel like I need someone who's honest with me too, not like always, yes, Ambreen, but someone who kind of says, Ambreen, you're bad at this and you need to do X, and it's like, I love you, but, like tell you the truth too. So you need a little bit of I think who we surround ourselves with socially. So I feel like our success is many layers, right? Like who we're surrounding ourselves with in our personal life too.
Question back there.
What I was thinking about is that there are a lot of ideas during the life that come into your mind, and you're always scared to take actions. For example, I'll tell you what I was thinking today. During a conference, I was thinking for all the Maulanas, for all the scholars, they go to Hausa, they come back, and a lot of them have struggled. They're trying to become a resident alim. And I was thinking they can all be professional. What we were talking about this morning, that we need to have a spiritual doctor as well. People have issues with, spirituality, being religious, and what we look is, we go to Center Maulana and get a free advice. But they could be providing those services to people. Says, hey, just like we call, I'm going to call my GI doc, I'm going to call by this doctor and make an appointment. I have this issue, So we can have for them, a company say, you have a spiritual question, you have a problem, this is the consult, you can call, you can pay $50 for a 40-minute consult or 30-minute consult and create some kind of, means of, living for them. And we need that. A lot of people, we're looking around to ask questions. A lot of people have those things. So, but how do we, like Uma is like a platform, like who gets started for them, says, hey, there's a bunch of, scholars that can, satisfy your spiritual needs or your questions and give you answers. And so, for example, how do we start this thing? Is there a platform that you have an idea that we can bring it to you, say, is that something, is just a good idea or just a bad idea? What do you think? And how do we make it to practical to make it, to make it happen? You know what I mean? So is there any, like you've mentioned, you work for Open, you have any resource that you can bring the idea that comes in your mind and you can bring it to a company or people and say, you think it's a valid idea or maybe it's a bad idea?
Well, we do actually. So we have had opportunities where members just say, hey, I've got an idea and I want to pitch it. And can people listen? And we were doing this during the pandemic. Like we'd get on Zoom, people would pitch an idea and then other people would listen and they would, give their feedback. But we'd ask people to be kind of prepared. They prepare a PowerPoint presentation and then they would really just pick it apart, and give their, and it's not even just Open, but there's a lot of different organizations that do that. Not even just Open, like so many I know in Boston, for example, we have a lot of different, whether they're accelerators or universities do it. We did it. I used to teach at Tufts University. So there's a lot of programs that you can find that can teach you about elevator pitches, how you can pitch to investors, if you're looking for investment, for example, or if you're looking for other support. So there are ways to do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think, you're asking the right questions. And I think these days we are so connected. There are so many online communities as well. And yes, organizations like Open, and there may be others like local in your area. I know, like, for example, for attorneys that basically want to create their own law firms, there are a lot of resources at the local bar association or the local law school, etc. So I would, just go about collecting a few resources and then kind of doing some kind of fact finding. And but that's exactly what I did. Like I reached out to a few other solo attorneys at that time who had just started their practices within the last 3-4 years. And I just kind of sat with them over coffee and lunch and said, hey, what did you guys do? How would you guide me? So a lot of those questions, like people that were ahead of me. And many, there was actually one of my mentors, he was 1 year younger than me. He's a litigating attorney in New York. And I used to chat with him a lot about like, hey, what has helped you succeed? And he gave me some of that advice that, look, you need to really think about whether you like litigation or not. Forget about everything else. Just first focus on what area of law you like to do and find that within the law. And I took me a couple of years to finally take his advice, but he was right. So any other questions? I think there was a question here, maybe?
Yeah, I was Assalamualaikum, by the way. I really related to your backstory because, like, I also I'm an economics teacher. I studied political science. I grew up in real estate because of my dad as well. So like from a very young age, I was like highly involved in it. So one of the questions that I was gonna ask is like, you always see like there's two different gaps for like the older community. They like went into school, they're kind of set in their place. So now they're afraid of taking this risk because like, all right, I'm stable. Do I want to risk it all and become like, I want to like kind of rock the boat. Do I want to do that? And for the younger people, they have a lot more time, but they don't have like the financial means to get started. Both of them have like a fear of like loss of financial stability, right? One already has it, and like no time. The younger generation, like they have a lot of time. They don't really have a lot of means of like, starting this thing. So they're always like, all right, let me get through this phase. Let me get stable. And then at some point in the future, maybe I'll do this. What would you recommend, especially for the younger generation? Because like there's a lot of younger faces in here that I see. Like, I think that there's always this fear like, oh, do I know enough? Where am I going to get the money to do this? Like, how do I start? What would you recommend to them?
So I think two things. First of all, I guess I understand the golden handcuffs, right? That people feel like they are just making too much money to lose that money, right? And then there are other people that feel like, oh, this is going to be something I'll follow my passions in my old age, maybe, and take that risk when I don't have liabilities. And I guess what I learned at a very young age, and this was just the reality of losing my father was only 50 years old when he passed away. I was an undergrad. That, hey, we don't know if we have an old age. I know that sounds very morbid, but we don't know what's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ahead of us is the reality. And so from my point of view is that if you feel passionate about something today, you should just pursue it, because at the end of the day, if we really believe our days are numbered, you're not going to think about the financial cost benefit analysis. You'll think about, like the happiest memories, and they always say that the biggest regrets people have are the risks that they did not take, not the decisions that they made. You know, at the end, at the final analysis, that people don't say, "Oh, I wish I hadn't done that." More likely, people will say, "I wish I had just tried to do X." So I always felt like I'd rather not regret that. Oh, if only I was just telling Muhammad about a job I did not apply to because someone said, "Oh, PhD required," and I'm still thinking I should have just applied. I could have got it. Someone else. I still think about that. But then I feel happy that, hey, even if I don't get something, that, hey, I did everything I could. I tried. It's not on me now. It's like it's got out of my system. So that's how I rationalize things.
I mean, that was a really good question, I think, and it's so important for us to kind of, try to, give some an assessment, right? When I talk to younger people, and like, it's actually the way I like to do it is like, if I could turn back the clock 30 years and be talking to a younger version of myself, right? If I was talking to the 18-year-old me, what would I tell him with the experience that I have now? What I would tell them is use your time. You are right now in a laboratory where you can collect experience, right? So you're not yet expected to bear the cost of rent. You maybe have a family support structure in place in the early years in your lives. And America is amazing. Like, we have all these lovely educational opportunities, professional internships. Like, this is a lovely community. Look at all the people around here. So much professional, business, academic expertise right here. And this is just in a very small little group, right? So use this time to gain experience with the end of figuring out what are you good at, what do you enjoy, right? So trial and error. Like, use your time to wisely, like with deliberate efforts, right? And figure out that nice alignment between your own skill set. Okay, we keep on building our skill sets. It doesn't mean that if we don't have it now, we can't develop it in the future, but you can figure out your general sort of inclination, right? So that's important. I would say look at it as initially gaining like an experience laboratory, right? So in your school, in your summer jobs, in the space that you get, talk to people, like talk to doctors, lawyers, whatever, business people, go out there, see the world. Like, who's doing what? Why do they do it? What do they like about doing it? That's it. That's your time now to do all of those things, right? No one's going to stop you. Like, people will find it interesting. Wow, this is a really bright young man or woman. They are asking me all these questions. How interesting. And then they're going to remember it. And the second thing I think is, this is going to be kind of funny. Like, so when I was a kid, my parents lived in a lot of smaller towns. And we finally moved to the big Karachi city later when I was a little bit older. So in these smaller towns, we had large yards, flower gardens, vegetable gardens. So I actually spent a lot of time around gardening. And I saw flowers, vegetables, fruit. And actually I look back to that experience, and that taught me a lot about, okay, you do the best you can, right? But then if it rains, or if it doesn't, if it freezes, if you don't get enough sunlight, there are things that are outside your control. But to make the plants grow, to make the flowers bloom, you have to follow some discipline, right? And then the seeds that you plant, they bear fruit later. So you are now planting the seeds for your future. And so be wise. Like, and I think there's I don't know who said this, like, you're throwing the dates, like you eat the khajur and you throw the seed behind you, because your trees are growing behind you as you go through life, right? So, and I use that those are our friendships. Those are the friendships we make along the way. Like, so surround yourself with quality people, surround yourself with people who challenge you, who teach you things, right? You learn from people. Hey, here's a good book. Here's a good movie. Here's a good song. You should surround yourself with those kind of people who help you and take a genuine interest in who your authentic self is, right? And we had that as a topic of discussion.
Yeah. Yes. And be bold, I think. Like, I think we ladies are sometimes raised, at least I was raised with, you know, don't always show like, you know, your weaknesses, and don't talk to strangers, and don't, you know, don't admit your failures. But I kind of feel that we have to be a little bit more bold. You do need to talk to strangers. You know, you need to ask people's advice, and people generally do want to help. I think that there's more to be gained.
Yeah, I think so. One of the questions now, Ambreen, I want to ask you is when we discuss mentors, I wanted you to tell us a little bit about maybe one or two people that stand out in your career. How did you connect with them, and how did they help you or improve your, you know, life journey?
Can I add one question to her as well?
Sure.
First, I want to ask, what is the cruciality of the mentors in today's world for younger generations especially? And to you, thank you. And to you, what would be, and each of you, by the way, Ali, or you as well, what are the 3 signs all these young people should look into while they're seeking mentorship? I think this will help everyone, including myself even, including everyone. I think these things, one the cruciality, and what are the 3 top things we should look for in mentors to help us, because wrong advice can do maybe some harm as well. So I think it's very critical and very sensitive to understand who I need to seek advice from, rather than getting the wrong advice and change the whole track. Thank you.
So those are both very good questions. And I should say I've had multiple mentors. So when I think about, when you're saying, what do you look for in a mentor? I would say, first define where is it that you want to go? And when I would look for a mentor, like let's say I was, you know, I when I joined Morgan Stanley, there were very few women in my role at that time. And I would kind of think to myself, well, where do I want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? That would be the person I would want to gain some mentorship from, that they have already, that maybe I can walk in their footsteps. You know, when I would see a very successful woman, if she was 20 years older than me, 15 years older, like she has done something right that I can learn from. And it doesn't have to be even, so I had some female mentors, because I worked in very male-dominated industries, both real estate, construction, and then finance. But then I also had some very strong, very, very wonderful male mentors as well, people who were very successful in their fields and also wanted to raise me up. So I would say one quality is that ideally they have the job that you want. Okay, that, you know, they have the job that you want, and it helps that you do the homework, that you know what you want, and 2, that they themselves also are accessible to you and they want to mentor you, right? So, because it's a two. Otherwise, it has to be 2 ways, and they have to, and you have to be able to be, like you had talked about vulnerability, that you can actually open up to them. And, you know, there's no kind of like feeling that I can't tell them about my horrible day at work today or what went wrong. Like, you should be able to be extremely, extremely vulnerable and honest with them so that they can actually help you. So I think that relationship, ability to bond in that way is very important. And yes, and a good mentor. So even though I've had many lives, I feel like I've led many lives. My mentor from Morgan Stanley is still my mentor 20 years later, even though I'm not in financial services. So like even now, like he calls me, he gives me advice. And then after, so I've had different mentors, whether it's in academia, because I teach. I've also had, I feel like when my father passed away, I was in real estate and construction. My uncles were very, very good mentors to me, because I first thought, how can I be in real, so many people would say, how can young girl be in real estate and construction and deal with, going to Home Depot and deal with plumbers and carpenters. And it's really the men in my family who gave me that strength and mentored me and were very, and they were very business savvy too. Although they didn't live in the US, but they would kind of give me advice about kind of like, just basic advice about giving me other examples of other women who had succeeded in, like Olayan family in Saudi Arabia, other women who were in much, similar situations, and just how to conduct meetings and being in those meetings with me at times. So I feel like it's extremely critical. I don't think I'd be here without mentors. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for asking that question. And kind of, here's the thing. I think entrepreneurs it's all about problem solving, right? You try to come up with an idea and you try to implement it, and then you try to work out all the different issues that arise. So I think one role of a good mentor is that these are people who they're a little bit ahead of you, perhaps in the problem solving department. And by that, it could just mean age, it could mean experience. So like, if you find someone who's done this thing 10 times before you, and then, it's easy to take like a sporting analogy, right? Like if you like tennis, like, you want to learn tennis, you find someone who knows how to play tennis really well, right? Or if you want to play soccer or football or whatever. So, how important is it? I mean, I think, that's also a good question, because in this day and age, we have so much information online. Like you can go to YouTube, you can go to Wikipedia, there's a lot of self-help stuff out there. You get ChatGPT, yeah. But to me, you see, the rewards of having that human-to-human connection is extremely valuable. And I'll give you a couple examples. Like, so, I told you that like in my early years as a lawyer, I worked at a litigation law firm. Now, these lawyers were experts at what they did. My bosses, the owners of the firm, they were very good at what they did. Eventually, I found that area was not for me. So I didn't have that overlap necessarily. Like I didn't want to continue in that specialization. However, these people have my bosses, it was a lady. And I kind of I grew up with 2 older sisters. I never had a brother. I grew up around a lot of girl cousins and like aunts, khalas, and puppy. And they, for some reason, women have impacted me very much. And I mean, that's the male members of the family as well. But the first boss that I really connected to was an amazing woman who was the managing partner of the division that I worked for in the law firm in DC. And how that meant, when I first started, I was just a fresh baby out of law school, and she was so much above me, right? So I didn't really have access to her. Like there were layers of junior people between us. But whenever we crossed in the hallway or in the photocopy room or whatever, she would always want to start talking, right? And I was at first very serious about talking about assignments and work and all that. And then one day she said, no, Mo, it's okay. Just tell me about your parents. Tell me about your siblings. Tell me about yourself. And then I slowly opened up. I told her that my mom and dad live in Pakistan, and that one of my life goal is that I want to bring them over to the USA, because I want, after my parents retire, for them to be in the USA. And, from that moment, she was so energized. And she supported me till today. She supports me because she connected with the idea that this kid is so interested in his parents, because she herself was like that. Her own older retired parents used to live in her house, which was unusual for like a Caucasian American family, right? Most people, I would say, I'm going to vacation with my parents like 2 times a year. They said, what's wrong with you? Like, what, your parents come and stay with you? Like, most of my American friends couldn't understand that, but she understood. And regardless of whatever I added to the organization, she had a stake in my success. And from that day, she supported me throughout. So that was a good mentor. I think, and these are long-term things, right? It's not a one-shot deal. These are lifelong fellow travelers.
No, I think this is very interesting what you just said, that you need to have mentor who have gone through that route already. So, for example, you cannot have a mentor if you want to create a business, for example, and you cannot have a mentor who is on the job all the time. He never had a business. So that's the wrong mentor to my understanding. What you just said, in fact, that's very, very absolutely correct, that you need to have someone which you yourself see in the next 15, 20 years. You want to be that, and that will be, I think, the right mentor. The second two things, I think, which I have learned over the time is, one, for the mentor, two things are very crucial. One is the trust, and second thing is the capacity. There are so many people you trust, but they might not have the capacity. Like, for example, I trust my wife big time, but she might not have the capacity of the luxury industry I'm into. But somebody have been amazing into the capacity, but I cannot trust that person. So I think the combination of that is very rare. But if we find that, I think that, and mentors are not flawless. They have failed many times. They are not like genie who can solve all the problems. They have their own issues, they have their own challenges, but they have solved and I think faced many more challenges than us, and we can learn from that. I think that's the core idea of mentorship.
I do also want to add to that I think that you can have a mentor, multiple mentors for multiple reasons. So I even feel, for example, as a woman, and if you're in a very male-dominated field, for me, I was starving for a female role model sometimes just to see, because I doubt, like I said, my first role models were my uncles, and then I was in a completely male-dominated world. So it was very hard, and to find just a woman who had made it in those fields, and it's. I guess those people are kind of inspiring, or they can also just tell you how to, I felt, maybe manage, the office politics, or going up the food chain. I think maybe today it's changed a lot, thank God. Like, I think it's, maybe people take that for granted a little bit. But, now even when you hear about Islamophobia, I think that's what I like even about Open. I feel like as minorities, as Muslims, I think it does help to have many examples that you can lean on people for different reasons at different times.
I'll also add, just real quick, we've got two questions back over there. Let's go to the questions.
Yeah.
But while the mic's getting there, I will say though, like we are talking about, there's no, like he said, there's no one prescription magic for everybody, right? You have to experiment. Now, to give credit to the generations that came before us, when our parents tell us, hey, work hard in school, study hard, trust them, they mean well. They mean well, right? Because here's what I learned. A lot of the advice that I got as a teenager from my dad and the family was meant to not benefit that teenage me, but the 40, 50-year-old me. And I look back and I say, hey, Dad, thanks, buddy. Thanks for telling me that 30 years ago, because it helps me today, right? And I'm grateful that I have something like that. So keep that in mind. The younger people, like a lot of what you are acquiring are tools that you may not realize that they immediately benefit your life, but they may come in handy 20 years down when you're walking down the road and maybe your body's a little more frail. Maybe you're not in the community of people who all adore and love you. But those things that you learned that the elders told you were important will be an asset for you. So please.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Farhad, and I'm myself a doctor, but not doing the clinical. I'm towards the research side. I'm taking you back from mentorship back to our discussion about starting the business. So after the COVID time, it's more like we are more towards virtual business ideas. And to give you an example is it's hard to decide. There are so many platforms available to start the business. And for example, Amazon, they are offering. So it's really difficult for us being not in that field. And I have no background in business. If I want to pursue or start anything, I only have Amazon platform, which like they are offering videos and giving us showing us that it is very wonderful idea. But I'm undecided, unsure. So if such type of things are there, then how can we make our mind and go from there? Like we had a discussion about the young people, but for my age, it's I think I don't have that much time to go through that channels.
So I was going to say, I am in a similar situation as yourself, that, when COVID happened, everything became virtual, everything. And this is when I introduced the Chief Technology Officer role in the nonprofit I was leading, and even in my own company. And I almost feel like actually every organization, even if you're like, whether you're a law firm or even a doctor's office, you should have a CTO, because there's now so many tools. I myself also get lost. And also even now, because you're now doing all these Zoom meetings and everything is digitized, then there's the other headache of storage, right? And so you have to figure out, well, what's the best way of storage? And then if you're storing everything, now you have to think about security, right? Data security, right? So it's actually another job description, whether it's a chief security officer or a chief technology officer. I would not do that yourself. I would actually outsource it. And the good news is that because we are in a virtual world, that person doesn't have to be in your locality, So I'm now working with people, whether they're in Vietnam, the Philippines, Pakistan, like I'm working with people all over the world, because everyone is speaking the same language when it comes to technology. So you have a lot of options in that respect.
Yeah, thoda sa, I'm going to add in, I'm just kind of stretching a little bit, so I'll get off the chair. So a couple of resources, right? So, lawyers, basically business lawyers, I may not have exactly dealt with, like, let's say your kind of business idea before, but in 20, 30 years of law practice, I've probably worked with others who have similar ideas, or I can probably talk to you for a few minutes and figure out what is it you're trying to do. And I can probably think of clients in the past who've done the same thing. So business lawyers might be a good starting point. Like you can find a good business lawyer in your area and connect with them. Just set up a 1-hour consultation. Many of them will give you a free consultation. Tell them about your idea. They may be able to give you a roadmap of how to move it. Accountants are very good. Accountants, we have many in our community. Accountants service all kinds of businesses, small and large. So try to connect and network with accountants and talk to them about your business idea. Most of our cities and colleges and universities have like small business incubators. So I would say if Dilawar Syed was here, he would have pointed you to a SBA website where there's a ton of resources on. I'm just want to make sure that I didn't misunderstand your question. But if the question was that you have this idea and you want to start on a business journey and you're trying to figure out, what your next steps are. So there will be a ton of resources, right, that can help you. And if you can reach out to either one of us by email, we'd be happy to share with you a list, as we would to others who with similar requests. Right? So there's going to be a lot of information. It will be challenging, lots of decisions to make, right? Okay, so we have about 5 minutes. I thought we had another question.
Something for her. I think the kids are the biggest resource over here. No, I'm fine. I think the kids are the biggest resource because they are very good at all this tech thing, especially with what she came up with, like Amazon and all those.
Yeah.
I think the kids in the family will be the number one resource.
Got it. So yeah,
They will give you the time, the ideas, and everything, and it will help them.
Yeah. So I think the comment here was that the younger generation that are like tech savvy, that are very, on Amazon, like they're experts. Like, it's shocking. I have a 5-year-old daughter and she's teed up a shopping cart on Amazon. And when I look at my phone, it's like I have 10 items in my shopping cart. Thank God she can't use the credit card to pay for it. But, but so question.
Likewise, we can see if they try getting into other things.
So question at the back.
Yeah, a very quick question. So someone's already kind of asked the question, one of my questions, which was, as a newbie, how do you get over the fear of making a mistake or making the wrong decision or failure? And I guess the answer was, there's no time like the present, just do it and take the leap. So a follow-up question to that is, what have you done or what advice do you have for if a mistake or failure happens, how to not let that hinder you from either moving forward or kind of restarting?
Well, I always give this example of, the Ford Model T, right? Have you heard of the Ford Model T? Well, when Henry Ford was coming up with the car, the model A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way through T kept failing. And if he just gave up we would never have a car today. So if you think about how many times Wilbur got on, the Wilbur brothers tried to fly that plane and people thought they were crazy and they failed and they failed and they failed. We wouldn't be flying in airplanes today. So it doesn't take, I think that you should never be discouraged if you fail once, twice, or 10 times. It could be the 30th time that you have hit a home run. It just matters how passionate do you feel? How much do you actually love what you're doing? And that should be what drives you.
Yeah, and I think so. The early part of what you were saying, in terms of, okay, so before you got to like the failure part, so I connected with something you said, which was, that fear of failure actually stays with you, right? When you're an entrepreneur, now you could be wildly successful and save up a lot of money, but like as a sole lawyer, my name was my brand. Like if I messed up a client case, that would harm my reputation and I could lose business. Also, the revenue cycle for entrepreneur fluctuates. Like some months I would make a lot of money, other months I would not make money, and I would be scared. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? How will I pay my rent? What if a big client, for a lot of small solo law practitioners, like you can tend to get attached to one big client and you're spending 3-4 months just working on that one client. And if they don't pay on time, then you don't have other revenue coming in, right? So that fear is something that you have to juggle. And I think you've got to definitely, family support helps. And but for me, and Ambreen had asked me this, because after 10 years of my own solo law practice, I joined a bigger law firm. And what was that decision like? So that decision was essentially, like, I was at a point in my life where I think if I was younger and I didn't have a child, I might have stayed with my own firm and kept growing it, because I was at a point where I was successful, but the next growth step would have been hiring my own staff, growing, adding people. But that was a time away from raising my daughter. Right. So I kind of made the choice of like, okay, this law firm, it wants to recruit me. They don't have an immigration team. They want me to come in and grow it. So it was a nice in between for me, because even though I joined a bigger law firm, like I merged my practice there, I'm still an independent agent within a larger law firm. So I still have that entrepreneurial space, but I have it with the cushion of a regular paycheck. But it's still, I think the pressures are still there, like, because the firm has expectations. My cash flow might be more stable, but I think I still have fun with it, like I did in the old practice. Thank you all so much for coming. Thanks, Ambreen, for getting me involved with this. Thank you for asking these questions. I want to thank Oma Leadership for, thank you to our new friend for his expertise. And please, we'll be happy to share our email addresses. Come up to us, ask questions. We'll be around. It's been great. Thanks a lot. Khudafez and best of luck.
Thanks, everyone.